Well, good afternoon, everyone. I am so excited to be here with you today. My name is Janice Malillo, the host of Stories That Inspire Us, the author series. And today I have an amazing guest on, and it looks like I am freezing up just a little bit. Can you hear and see me okay, William?
All set. No
Okay.
problem here.
The beauty of live podcasting. Before I formally introduce my guest, I'm going to, excuse me, hold up his book. And obviously our listeners on the Wisdom audio app will not be able to see the book, of course. The Death and Resurrection of Baseball, Echoes from a Distant Past. And William, I just want to read something to you really quick that I wrote as I was flipping through your book when I first received it. And I wrote down before even I had a chance to read this book.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
I'm still having a bad hair day. Oh, well. And this is what I wrote. Extinct game finds light.
Mhm.
You wrote that in your book.
Uh-huh. Well,
And of course, I want to formally introduce the author segment today goes to an amazing man, William Douglas. Welcome to the Stories podcast.
Janice, it's an honor to be on your show. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So thank you for having me on.
You are so welcome. So as I mentioned, I found that when I was reading through the book, when I actually read those words, I'm like, wait a minute, I know I wrote that down in my notes. And there it was. And again, I have so many stickies on his book. And I also want to really congratulate you for the Reader's 5-star award. That's pretty amazing, pretty significant, especially for a first-time author.
Yeah, I was surprised too, delightfully surprised, I might add. I put that out there and I had a team of beta readers that were following along as the book developed, and I was getting some very positive feedback, one in particular from a gal pal of mine who has a master's degree in English and was actually an English teacher in I believe middle school, and also a very avid reader. And I really took note of the fact that she was really enjoying the story. But there's always that doubt. Well, they know me all, so maybe they're putting a little sugar on there.
Mhm.
So when I got the review from Reader's Choice from a totally disconnected person from my orbit, it was really encouraging to read that.
I'm sure that it was. And I obviously have so many questions, and I kind of want to start at the beginning because what really stood out to me when I first began reading this book was how you wrote the preface, the preface. I have
Yes,
trouble pronouncing that.
yes, yes,
And you really shared with your readers behind the stories on how you developed this storyline. And that's really, for me, an historical reference because you quoted, I believe it was Abraham Lincoln,
uh-huh,
and also James Earl Jones. And then you write your preface as if you were already in the book. And when I was reading that, I thought he has really dove not into this book, but really to each character that you created within this book.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm, yeah. Yeah, the preface is extremely important for the reader to read because the story really is totally unique in all of literature. You're not going to find anything that's remotely like it. And so in that uniqueness, there's going to be naturally questions about, well, is this plausible? And when you read the preface, that helps build the foundation that answers that question really in the preface. Yes, it is plausible. What the story you're about to read is totally plausible.
Yeah, in fact, and there's so many minute details I can go into. And of course, I think one of your main characters, the grandfather, of course,
Yes,
his grandson, Joe Scott,
correct.
and their amazing bond as a family. But then I kind of want to fast forward a little bit because I knew that you were just like starting to introduce the characters and where all this was going. And then the letter was pulled out.
Correct. The letter is extremely important. Um, so it's okay. It's towards the beginning of the book, so it's really not a spoiler alert, in my opinion. But the letter really uh, ties back to the Civil War and what was going on then, and also you get a feel uh, for the tone that was going on in the country at the time and how the country was so divided. And of course, when I wrote that part of the book, I was thinking about the current day.
Mhm.
And one thing I wrestled with was, well, when I was developing the story, where do I put this? I didn't want to put it too close to now because I didn't want time to come and it's already in the past. So if I had the events in the book occurring like in 2025 or something like that. So I purposely chose a far enough distance in the book
Mhm.
purposely so that number one, it gives readers pause about where we're at currently as a country, where we could be headed, and allows time for discussion too, because I think there is still time to prevent what could happen here unless we relearn the art of getting along with one another again. But the letter goes in great detail about the war as it is developing in the year 2061 and some of the destruction that's already gone on,
Mhm.
and also the personal convictions of his great great grandfather to be a neutral, not wanting to get involved with firing upon other Americans.
Exactly. And there's what I mean, this is just like, as I said, phenomenally written. And is all right with you if I read just two
Sure.
sentences that
Yeah.
really stuck out to me?
Yep.
So in this letter, now the grandfather and the grandson are sitting there, and I thought this is where things really start to happen. And it's probably a couple paragraphs in, or 2 or 3 pages. And this is what it says. So it is that you are now the bearer of an important mission to further the cultural recovery of the United States of America.
Mm-hmm.
Resurrection of baseball.
Mm-hmm.
When I read that, I got the chills.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
It was so much more than baseball, yet baseball was kind of the foundation. Think about it. I remember growing up as a kid, living in Connecticut. Depending on where you lived in Connecticut, you were either a Boston Red Sox fan or
Sure.
a Yankees fan, and we were kind of right on the cusp of that. And
Sure.
I remember baseball, hot dogs, and apple pie.
Sure. Yeah. Baseball has always been a metaphor for America. So, and just a quick synopsis for the readers. I mean, the central theme of the story is that in the year 2061, a second civil war occurs. And prior to that, the sport of baseball has been on a downward trajectory as far as popularity. And then the war comes along and then totally kills the sport. And then 140 years in the future, this 12-year-old boy, Joe Scott, rediscovers a relic with a tie back to baseball. And then that's the central theme of the story is rediscovering the sport. But as you correctly saw in the storyline, the story is much more than about baseball because of the metaphor that baseball has for America itself.
It absolutely is. And when I was reading the part where he actually found the artifact,
Right.
um, multiple wows were heard.
Huh.
That's pretty phenomenal when you think about where, he and his buddies, one day they knew they weren't supposed to be in the VFW field because of what had transpired, as you so described in the book. And Joe was so drawn to that. And now you have this additional layer of the grandfather being involved with this letter. And they set out on a course.
Uh-huh.
And it was really, I think, a family oriented, let's get back to basics.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And that was an important element that I wanted to weave into the story, is that after the maelstrom of a second American Civil War has ended, the survivors are given a lot of time, number one, just recover, but number two, to analyze how the heck did we get here and how do we make sure this never ever happens again. And one of the elements, that I put in there was this kind of a reset with family dynamics, where families are close again. And a really important element that illustrates that in the book is the family dinner time, where you all sit down, sit down together at the dinner table and break bread together and share in one another's days, triumphs and tragedies. And how, when you think about the culture that we have now in America, the family dinner is almost a lost art, because everybody's running around to and fro, going to this practice and the ballet and this sport and that sport, and meals are eaten on the run, or some people are eating home alone while others are out, and it's just a total mishmash. And we're missing something in our culture now, because the family dinners are becoming so rare. I mean, they still exist. I don't want to mislead the readers, because they still exist, but as an everyday occurrence, I think there's something therapeutic and cathartic about a family coming together on a nightly basis, and again sharing the day's triumphs and tragedies. And it helps solidify and propel and also build an armor around those family bonds that becomes very hard to penetrate.
We were just talking about that the other evening, that way back when we were kids, it was Sunday, especially Sundays.
Yeah,
If you
right.
were at your parents' house having Sunday dinner,
Right.
and the family would gather, and it was really such a magical time. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Sure.
Because I think deep down that it's not that people don't want to, it's that we're thrown in so many different directions.
Correct.
And your book really kind of, in an indiscriminate kind of way, talks about that. I mean, you can tell with the characters interacting with one another that they have a special family bond, and
Yes.
it really continues. How do I say this without, because there's so much I want to say and chat about, but I don't want to get the whole book away, of course. But it really sparks not just the community with where he lives.
Yeah.
And we'll get to a little bit about that. And also what I loved about it is how you described how they found different things and how they really immersed themselves into learning about the sport of baseball, but also learning to work together.
Sure. Yeah. because baseball is a team sport, there's no uh there's no room for a me first attitude. You have to learn to work together. And part of learning the sport, particularly when you're learning it without adult supervision, is you're learning skills like conflict resolution. He was safe, no, he was out, or she was safe, she was out, whatever. And you're learning how to get along with one another towards a common goal, you know, which is
Mhm.
important. And so I think that really, I think, comes out in the storyline.
Oh, it does, and which leads me to my next question, or actually a comment. The boys just want to have fun,
Yeah,
but the girls also want to have fun as well.
sure.
And I think that the girls in, the storyline, of course, were really kind of drawn into, hey, they're all getting together, doing something, playing this game together, and really learning so much from this game, but learning so much about life in the process.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The sisters, they get involved in one of the first games.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, I could have had them later in the story as well, but uh, I have a group of guy friends that are very near and dear to my heart, as well as my brother Scott, and my son Joe, hence the name
Hmm.
for the character, in honor of my son Joe and my brother Scott, Joe Scott. So, but I had a group of guys that I played ball with when I was younger, so I kind of weave them into the story there as the story develops. But yeah, definitely room for the girls as well.
Absolutely. And, Joe, the character Joe in the book, didn't just play the game, he studied it from so many different, and I'm not well versed in all, like, first baseman, center fieldman, or the correct terminology for that.
Sure,
Um,
sure,
so I do apologize for that. But he really studied the game very hard so that he really wanted to not only learn from that, but to teach others.
correct, correct. And that's another important element, is that you see that later on in the stories that develops, that he wants the game not just to be played locally, but to go back out to the rest of the country is kind of a gift, and another step in healing, because the country, even though the country's back on its feet, there's still missing pieces of the culture that were destroyed in the war. They just don't know it because of the destruction of data. And and obviously baseball, uh, in the story is an important cultural element to be restored to the country. And in trying to learn the game, his handicap is this vacuum of knowledge. There's no one that can tell him how to play the game, and so they have to study all this old archival stuff that they find, on the farm, and to try and figure things out.
Yeah, and as I was reading that, it kind of reminded me, um, of that movie Back to the Future, where,
Uh-huh.
different segments of that. And
Uh-huh.
I was thinking to myself, wow, if he can only go back in time,
Uh-huh. Right.
who
Yeah.
knows what may happen in the future. Maybe there's a second book on the way, who knows. Um,
There is.
that is so awesome. Um, as you go through the book, news of what Joe and his family are doing, not it starts to kind of infiltrate out throughout their community, um, between a local reporter, then a national news anchor woman,
Yep.
and then so much after that. When you were writing that, and especially when a certain someone came in, and I'm trying to choose my words very carefully,
Yes, that's okay.
and And if you want to divulge that, that's okay.
We'll leave,
But
we'll leave that one for the readers to dig into.
yes, but really it was such a level playing field, and people really took to Joe's story, really took to the grandfather being involved and really getting the word out there, that it really started to grow like wildfire.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, when I was again developing that part, I was like, okay, so I just have to put myself in that situation myself. I'm like, okay, so you got this country that was almost destroyed by ourselves. We've recovered. We're getting along the way we're supposed to get along now, which is agreeing to disagree. And and then there's parts of our past that we don't even know about, because one of the elements in the destruction of the country is the destruction of all data, literally. And so they're trying to piece all this back together again from paper archives. They have to go and rescan everything in, because I mean right now all data essentially is on a hard drive somewhere. So that's all been lost, and so again, this whole process of, well, they found this archival material, they've really taken an interest in it, and they've got their feet wet, so to speak, and they really really love the game. Like, wow, this is really different, because there's so many different elements, and it's really cool, and they like it, and so they want to share that exuberance with their buddies in school, and then in the neighborhood, and then of course then the neighborhood wants to share it with a wider circle. Excuse me. And then that circle obviously starts to expand, and that's all part of the overall theme of restoring it to the culture of America itself.
Which brings me, of course, to the historical aspect of your book. And there's such a significance in history.
Mm-hmm.
We learn, hopefully we learn from our past, meaning the history, but it's so important to embrace what was, whether it was good, bad, or indifferent, and how we learn to go forward
Yeah.
as a nation, pretty much.
Sure. Sure. And there's a part in the book where I actually write about after the war, when sociologists and psychologists, they all get together, and they're tasked to try and come up with a comprehensive report as to how did we get here, how do we avoid this, et cetera, that never happens again. And then they come up with answers to those questions. But and then tying back to the previous conversation we just had a couple minutes ago, one important factor was the breakdown of the family. And one important factor for solidifying the family unit was the it sounded kind of corny to them, and but it worked, and that was the restoration of the family dinner, and how important that was in building that family cohesion.
Wow. When you think of Grandpa Moses in your book, is that perhaps a little reflection of yourself?
Yes, definitely. As a fan of baseball, I've been out to Dyersville, Iowa several times. In fact, I went to the Field of Dreams game last year, saw the Cubs. And then the year before that, I saw the inaugural game with the White Sox and the Yankees at the Field of Dreams game. And then prior to that, I was out there just visiting, because I love the movie site. And while the movie is not a part of the storyline at all, the location, Dyersville, I chose purposely is the home of Grandpa Moses because of its link to the game. And I thought it would be kind of a tip of the hat, as it were, to the movie The Field of Dreams to have Dyersville in there. And so the character himself, Grandpa Moses, is really a mixture of myself, Sam Elliott, Wilford Brimley, and then the character actor, whose name escapes me, who was in several John Wayne movies, and one of them, I think it was called The Searchers. I think his name was Moses. So
That is very interesting. At one point, there's so many different points, of course, but at one point, you talk about from the top. And how, again, it goes back to history.
uh-huh.
And how this sparked not only a community, and then again, it kind of spired it out, but it did spark a nation.
Sure.
I can imagine myself being there and witnessing this and being so excited about it.
Sure.
What was it about from the top that, or even from your book in general, that stands out to you as being from the top?
Yeah, that particular part, which again, we're not going to reveal that to the listeners because I want to entice them. But
Absolutely.
there's certain names in American history that evoke strong feelings, strong memories, strong emotions, and that is one of them. And even though as history goes on, you learn more and more, the good, the bad, and the ugly. There's still that luster that is attached with certain names in American history. And, that particular one, I think, even for people on both sides of the aisle, still evokes a kind of a fondness and kind of a longing for, boy, be nice to have those days again, and so I was very purposeful in that particular selection, and how that ties into those emotions that I spoke about, and the feelings of optimism. That's a big one. The feeling of optimism, feeling of we can do anything, as a country when we put our mind to it. And but I think more importantly, it's just a feeling of hope, of being hopeful again.
Yeah.
And one thing that I think is really starting to wane in our culture right now is the sense of hope. In fact, it's just the opposite. I mean, most people are starting to feel like, this is hopeless. How are we going to get out of this mess that we're in? It seems like it doesn't matter who's in office, things continue to decline. Uh, you know, uh, the rhetoric keeps heating up. Where does this all end? And that's part of the undercurrent in the story that I wanted to weave in there to make the reader think about, how do we take a step back from where we're headed? Because the trajectory that the country is on right now, unless some force intervenes to intercept that trajectory, the trajectory we're on only has one plausible outcome. That would be a horrible Second Civil War.
Hmm.
Something has to intercept that trajectory, right now or soon or 10 years from now, wherever, to change the course that we're on. And again, get people to tone down the rhetoric, to disengage from tribalism, and learn to get along with one another again.
That would be a beautiful thing. And it made me, as you were describing that, think of what transpired a few weeks ago, with that football game with the Buffalo Bills
Yeah, correct. Yeah,
and how we just all came together and prayed for this young man, and
sure.
to see him out and about now as much as he can be. I don't obviously know the status of his well-being, and we still continue to wish him well, but that feeling of rallying around this young man, so full of life one moment, and the next he was fighting for his life, and his
Yeah.
parents and teammates and family and extended friends watching that unfold, as
Sure.
did everyone from around the United
Sure.
States, of course.
Yeah, and it was amazing too to see a commentator on ESPN on live television take pause and say, you know what, I'm just going to pray right now. I mean, that was, that's a powerful moment. And that's, another tie back to the book is the faith element, which I wove in there as well, because I'm a person of faith myself. But I wanted to make sure that was in there, and not in an overpowering way, not in a proselytizing way, but just as a kind of a gentle appearance periodically throughout the story, that faith is important to a couple of the characters. and
Oh,
and
absolutely.
and really, when you look at the history of the United States, faith has been an important part of America's past, and I think can be again. I really do. Even though the latest was, I don't know, it was a Pew poll that came out that said that 60% of Americans are now identifying as atheists. So that's kind of a sad commentary.
Hmm. William, have any of your grandchildren read your book?
No, not yet. Parents, of course, my brother, a lot of friends have read it. Some people from my church, some ex coworkers from a very big pharmacy retailer who I won't name. You could probably guess, and obviously others as well. I had a really good conversation a couple weeks ago with a gentleman by the name of Don Wardlow. Don, in my opinion, should be in the Baseball Hall of Fame. He was the first ever completely blind radio broadcaster of baseball games.
Wow.
Yeah, he had quite a career. His boss was Michael Veck, who was the son of Bill Veck, and Bill Veck is a famous baseball figure who owned at one point the Cleveland Indians, and another point he owned the Chicago White Sox. But um, Don mostly worked in the minor league circuit, and he got a hold of the book, and he's got his own. He was talking about the book and how much he loved the story himself, and that it evoked a lot of strong emotions and memories, not only of his broadcasting days, but of also of his youth. So, I keep hearing these stories, and it gives me encouragement that there's a lot of legs left in the book, and I'm looking forward to see what happens here in 2023.
That is awesome. Let me ask you something somewhat off topic. And before we started recording, we were just signing on to the Wisdom audio app, And by the way, I want to say thank you to all our amazing listeners currently on the Wisdom Audio app. What actor would you want to play Grandpa Joe? Remember, I was saying, I see your
Grandpa
book.
Moses?
Yeah, Grandpa Moses.
Well, if he was still around, Wilford Brimley, but he's since passed on. I could see, Sam Elliott doing that role. I could see maybe they'd have to make him look a little older, but I could see a Kevin Costner doing that role, you
Mhm.
know. But yeah, definitely Sam Elliott comes to mind.
I
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
And of course, who would you want as an actor to play Joe Scott?
A total unknown.
Total unknown.
Total unknown. Yep. I think that
That
would be
answer
cool.
came rather quickly.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that would be cool to find someone that, first of all, to for the people doing the selection, be very immersed in the character that's in the book, and then go through the process of, okay, let's have some auditions here. Let's find somebody brandy new, a 12-year-old boy brandy new, and cast them as the character.
I like that. I want to chat now about, and I'm going to bring this up very cautiously, of course. And I will just say extra innings. I found that very captivating.
Uh-huh.
When you were writing that, and again, immersing yourself in that story for these characters,
Uh-huh.
what is one thing that from that you want our listeners and viewers to know, or anybody who picks up your book and reads it? What is one big thing that you want them to know, why that was so important for you to have that in there?
Well, there's a couple things. There's obviously a tie back to the golden era of baseball. There's a tie back to a certain character from that era, a couple characters actually. But there's also just a reminder of the faith element,
Mhm.
and that how if God cares about sparrows, if he knows the number of hairs on our head, then I think he also takes delight in some of the hobbies that humans like to partake in and enjoy. Some of the sports they like to partake in and enjoy, like baseball. And so the idea, it's kind of a mishmash of all that, but ultimately, just kind of I don't know if I can use the term, just kind of a compass heading for true north, you know,
Ah,
and how important that is, I think, not only for individuals, but for a community and a country to have that true north heading when it comes to, our faith in God as a country, and as a community, and as an individual. So
wow, that was amazing. Where can our viewers and listeners get in contact with you?
so the easiest way would be to go to my author williamrdouglas.com website.
Mhm.
It's a launch pad from there. You can order the book from there by clicking on one of the icons to Amazon, Apple, or Barnes and Noble. You can watch the book trailer. Did you have a chance to see the book trailer? You saw
Yes,
the
I
book
was
trailer?
just going to mention that the book trailer, it will just blow you away. And of course, I will make sure that all of your information, as well as a link to your book trailer. Oh my gosh, I think I told you when I first saw that, I was like, oh my
Uh-huh.
God.
Yeah, yeah. And I went out on Fiverr, uh, specifically looking for a particular tone of voice. And the guy that I hired, I mean, he was perfect. I wanted something James Earl Jones's to that type of a deep voice. And well, he hit it right on the head, I tell you. Yeah, it's a
Oh my
great,
gosh.
great trailer.
It- He certainly did. Before we
It's
saw,
only 40 seconds long, but it does in 40 seconds. I mean, he manages to lay out basically the synopsis of the book.
oh, he does, and he does it in such a way, and the sound of his voice, obviously, and
Yeah,
the depth of his voice, like you felt the storyline through his voice, and then watching that short video, it
sure,
really gave you an amazing
sure,
glimpse into this book.
sure. Yep. Yeah. So again, author WilliamRDouglas.com, Launchpad. You can email me through that site if you want to email me, get a hold of me. You can also see all the other places I've been appearing on. I'll have a link obviously out to your podcast as soon as I get it, and would love to hear from readers as this whole thing develops here. So, and there's
Wow.
also a lot of reviews out there too that people can read up on if they want to see what some of the readers have been commenting on about the book.
Yes, and it is such a phenomenal book. First time author, William R. Douglas, readers 5-star award, just phenomenal. This is the book that anybody in your family will sit down and enjoy. And maybe you can have a little family book club and each take turns reading a specific chapter or however you do it.
Yes, yes,
And when you're at the Sunday dinner, of course, okay, we can't forget that.
yep.
William, I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day to be on the Stories That Inspire Us, the author series with me. It has been my honor and privilege, and I hope you definitely will consider coming back soon.
I would love to. I would love to. It's been a great time being on the show. By the way, Janice, you're the first one to have read the whole book before interviewing me on a podcast. So congratulations.
Thank you. You know what? And, I'm holding up the book again. And again, you can see all my stickies. I know our listeners on Wisdom can't see it, but this took me back to a simpler time.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yep.
And it's so well written. And when you start reading it, you will be excited for the characters to see where they transpire, how they evolve in the book, and
Right.
how the death and resurrection of baseball, echoes from a distant past, come to life.
Yep.
My name is Janice Mulilo, the host of the Stories That Inspire Us, the author series. Remember, if you have a story to share, it's that important. Somebody needs to hear your story. Somebody needs to be inspired by your story. We hope to see you again real soon. And as always, thank you, everyone. Thank you, William. And have
Thanks,
a great day.
Janice.
You're
God
very
bless.
welcome. God bless.